Hello everyone, welcome back. We've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. I never thought asking for a prenup would end a 2.5-year relationship and an 8-month engagement. But that's exactly what happened when my fiancée called it an insult. My name is Tyler, and this is the story of how one conversation about protecting my business assets revealed that the woman I planned to marry saw my success as something she was already entitled to. The whole situation started innocently enough, some years ago, at a mutual friend's engagement party. I was 26, working in real estate development, and had just closed on my second rental property. My friend who got engaged introduced me to her friend Amanda from nursing school, a beautiful, ambitious 24-year-old who'd just gotten her nurse practitioner certification. Amanda and I hit it off immediately. She was passionate about her career, loved staying active, and had this infectious enthusiasm for travel and adventure. We spent the evening talking about places we wanted to visit and our career goals. She seemed impressed by my real estate ventures, asking thoughtful questions about property investment and market trends. We started dating regularly in the spring of the same year. From her behavior, I believed Amanda was different from other women I dated. She was genuinely interested in my business, often asking how projects were progressing and celebrating my successes with genuine excitement. When I bought my third rental property that summer, she insisted on taking me out to dinner to celebrate. By our second year together, Amanda had moved into my downtown condo. Our relationship felt stable and supportive. She worked long shifts at the hospital, while I focused on growing my real estate portfolio and development company. We talked about future plans constantly. During this time, my business was experiencing significant growth. What had started as a side hustle, buying and renovating single rental properties, had evolved into a legitimate development company. Fast forward some years ahead, and I owned 8 rental properties and had completed 3 successful small development projects. My business partner Mitchell and I were grossing over a few $100,000 annually, and my personal net worth had increased way beyond my expectations. Amanda seemed proud of my success, often bragging to her friends about my projects and showing off photos of our latest renovations on social media. Her family was equally impressed. Her father worked in construction and appreciated the complexity of what I was building. Her mother would joke at family gatherings about Amanda landing a real catch. At 29, I felt ready for marriage. Amanda and I had been together for 2.5 years. We were compatible in all the important ways, and she'd been hinting about engagement for months. I proposed a few weeks after my birthday during a weekend trip. Amanda said yes immediately, and we spent the rest of the weekend planning our wedding. Everything seemed perfect. In the weeks that followed, we set a budget of $35,000 for the reception at an upscale country club, sent save the dates to over 100 guests, and started planning what we both thought would be the happiest day of our lives. I had no idea that asking her to sign a simple legal document would reveal a side of Amanda and her family that would make me question everything I thought I knew about our relationship. Wedding planning consumed most of our summer and fall. Amanda dove into the details with characteristic thoroughness, creating Pinterest boards and spreadsheets for everything from centerpieces to music selections. The country club required an $8,000 deposit, which I paid without hesitation. The photographer wanted a portion of the payment up front, and the caterer demanded their own commitment fee. I handled all these expenses while Amanda focused on the aesthetic details. My parents contributed some money toward the wedding, alongside Amanda's parents. Even with their contributions, I was covering the majority of the costs, which didn't bother me initially. I was earning significantly more than Amanda, and I wanted our wedding to be special. However, as the months progressed, I started noticing changes in Amanda's spending habits and attitude toward money. After we got engaged, she began making expensive purchases without consulting me. A $2,000 wedding dress upgrade, $800 bridesmaid gift sets, and a $1,500 bridal shower at an upscale restaurant. When I gently questioned these expenses, she'd remind me that this was our wedding and we could afford it. The language shift was subtle but significant. Amanda started referring to our business and our properties when talking to friends and family. At her brother's birthday party, I overheard her telling her cousins about our latest development project and how we were planning to expand into commercial real estate. These weren't technically lies, but they reflected an assumption of ownership that made me increasingly uncomfortable. Her family's attitude also began to shift. Her father, who had always been respectful of my work, started offering unsolicited advice about our business decisions. Her mother, in different scenarios, would make comments about how Amanda deserved nice things since you two were doing so well financially. The comments were meant to be lighthearted, but they revealed an underlying assumption that my financial success automatically extended to Amanda, and by extension, her entire family. This concerned me, though I tried to dismiss it as normal pre-wedding excitement and nerves. A few months before the wedding, my business partner raised a topic that had been nagging at the back of my mind. We were reviewing quarterly profits when he mentioned his recent divorce settlement, which had cost him half his construction business and 2 of his rental properties. Mitchell suggested I consider a prenuptial agreement to protect the assets I'd built before my relationship with Amanda. Initially, I was dismissive. Amanda wasn't like Mitchell's ex-wife, who had never shown interest in his business until the divorce proceedings. Amanda had been supportive of my real estate ventures from the beginning, celebrating my successes and encouraging my expansion plans. However, Mitchell's warning planted a seed of concern that grew over the following weeks. I started paying closer attention to how Amanda talked about money and our future finances. During dinner conversations, she'd make plans for our next property purchase or discuss how we should invest the profits from recent sales. When I'd remind her that the business belonged to Mitchell and me, she'd laugh and say that would change after we were married. These conversations made me realize that Amanda viewed our upcoming marriage as an automatic entitlement to half of everything I'd worked to build. She wasn't necessarily wrong from a legal standpoint. In our state, assets acquired during marriage are generally considered marital property. However, her assumption troubled me because it suggested she saw my premarital business success as something she'd already earned simply by agreeing to marry me. I decided to consult an attorney about prenuptial agreements. A family law specialist recommended by my accountant explained the realities of property division in divorce cases. Without a prenup, Amanda would likely be entitled to half of any business growth or property appreciation that occurred during our marriage, regardless of her actual contribution to those successes. The lawyer walked me through several case studies of business owners who'd lost substantial assets in divorce settlements. One man had built a successful landscaping company before marriage, only to lose half of it 5 years later when his wife decided she preferred her personal trainer to her husband. Another had seen his rental property portfolio decimated because his ex-wife convinced the judge she deserved compensation for supporting his career by attending business networking events. These stories weren't meant to scare me away from marriage, but they illustrated why prenuptial agreements existed. A properly structured prenup would protect the assets I'd built before meeting Amanda, while ensuring she was fairly compensated for any contributions she made to our shared financial future. It seemed like a reasonable precaution for someone in my financial position. The lawyer drafted a standard prenuptial agreement that protected my existing properties and business interests, while allowing for shared ownership of assets we'd acquire together during marriage. The document also included provisions for spousal support and property division that were generous to Amanda, ensuring she wouldn't be left destitute if our marriage ended badly. Armed with this legal document and a clear understanding of its necessity, I approached Amanda about the prenup. I chose a quiet evening when we were both relaxed after dinner. I explained that my attorney had recommended a prenuptial agreement given the size of my business assets, framing it as a standard protection for entrepreneurs and business owners. Amanda's initial reaction was surprise. She asked thoughtful questions about what the prenup would cover and how it would affect our financial future together. I explained that the agreement protected what I'd built before our relationship, while ensuring we'd share equally in everything we created as a married couple. She listened carefully and asked for time to think about it and do her own research. I gave Amanda 2 weeks to consider the prenup, encouraging her to consult her own attorney if she had concerns. This seemed reasonable. Prenups are serious legal documents that shouldn't be signed without careful consideration. I assumed she'd have some questions or want to negotiate certain terms, but I expected we'd ultimately reach an agreement that protected both of our interests. During those 2 weeks, Amanda discussed the prenup extensively with her family. According to what she told me later, the conversation didn't go well. Her father viewed the prenup as evidence that I didn't trust Amanda or believe our marriage would last. Her mother interpreted it as an insult to their family, suggesting I thought they were gold diggers trying to steal my money. Armed with these views from her family, Amanda started viewing the agreement as evidence that I was planning for our marriage to fail rather than protecting assets I'd legitimately earned before we met. Her family's negative reaction reinforced these feelings, turning what should have been a practical legal discussion into an emotional referendum on our relationship. 2 months before our wedding, I could sense Amanda's growing resentment about the prenup, though she hadn't given me her final answer. She'd make sarcastic comments about my precious business and pointedly refer to my properties as yours rather than ours during conversations. The tension was affecting other aspects of our relationship, making what should have been an exciting time feel stressful and adversarial. 2 weeks later, I asked Amanda for her decision about the prenup. I needed to know where we stood before we got any deeper into wedding preparations. Amanda had clearly prepared for this conversation. She told me she'd thought extensively about the prenup and had decided she couldn't sign it. She called the agreement an insult to our relationship and evidence that I didn't trust her or believe in our marriage. According to Amanda, asking your future spouse to sign a prenup was tantamount to planning for divorce before you even got married. I tried to explain the business rationale behind the prenup, emphasizing that it wasn't about trust or lack of faith in our relationship. The agreement was about protecting assets I'd worked to build long before I met her, ensuring that my business partner Mitchell wouldn't be affected if something happened to our marriage, and providing clear guidelines for property division that would benefit both of us. Amanda became increasingly emotional during our conversation, accusing me of caring more about my money than our relationship. She said that people who truly loved each other didn't need legal documents to define their commitment. According to her, the prenup proved I was more concerned with protecting my wealth than building a life with her. I could see this conversation escalating into a fight that would resolve nothing, so I simply replied, "I understand." This seemed to diffuse the immediate tension, though it obviously didn't resolve our underlying disagreement. Amanda went to bed in the guest room that night, and we both avoided discussing the prenup further, though the tension was palpable. That night, lying awake in my own bed, I realized we had reached an impasse that revealed fundamental differences in how we viewed money, marriage, and mutual responsibility. Amanda's refusal to sign the prenup wasn't just about the legal document. It reflected her belief that my success belonged to both of us, simply because we were engaged. She genuinely couldn't understand why I'd want to protect assets I'd earned before we even met. More troubling was her inability to see the prenup from my perspective. I wasn't asking her to forfeit rights to our shared future. I was trying to protect what I'd built independently while ensuring we'd both benefit from what we created together. Her refusal to even consider this compromise suggested we had incompatible views about financial responsibility and individual achievement. By morning, I'd made my decision. If Amanda couldn't understand why protecting my premarital assets was reasonable and necessary, she wasn't the right person to build a financial future with. Her attitude showed she already considered herself entitled to half of everything I owned, regardless of when or how I'd acquired it. That level of financial entitlement in a partnership was a red flag I couldn't ignore. That same morning, Amanda left for her morning shift at the hospital as usual. We exchanged polite goodbyes, but both of us knew our relationship had fundamentally changed overnight. As soon as she left, I started making phone calls to cancel our wedding. The country club was understanding, but firm about its cancellation policy. Canceling so close to the event date meant forfeiting our deposit. The photographer was more flexible, refunding most of our deposit. I reached an agreement with the caterer and got some money back. In total, Canceling the wedding cost me thousands of dollars in lost deposits and fees. Every dollar I lost felt like money well spent to avoid what would have been a financially and emotionally disastrous marriage. By noon, I'd canceled all the major vendors and started thinking about how to announce the wedding cancellation. Amanda was still at work, unaware that our wedding no longer existed. I needed to tell her before she found out from vendors or guests, but I also wanted to control the narrative about why our engagement was ending. I crafted a carefully worded Facebook post announcing the cancellation of our wedding due to fundamental differences in our values and life goals. I thanked everyone who had supported our relationship and asked for privacy during this difficult time. I tagged Amanda in the post, knowing she'd see it when she checked social media during her lunch break. The post went live at 12:30 p.m. Within an hour, I had dozens of comments and private messages from friends and family expressing shock and offering support. Some friends reached out immediately to see if there was anything they could do to help. My parents called within 2 hours, concerned but supportive of my decision. Amanda called me at 1:45 p.m., screaming into the phone from her car in the hospital parking lot. She was humiliated, furious, and completely blindsided by the public announcement. According to Amanda, I'd embarrassed her in front of everyone we knew by posting about our breakup on social media before we'd even finished discussing our problems. I explained that we had finished discussing our problems. She'd made her position clear about the prenup, and I'd made mine clear by canceling the wedding. There was nothing left to negotiate or discuss. Amanda threatened to come home immediately to continue the argument, but I suggested she stay with her parents that night so we could both cool down before attempting any further conversation. She agreed to stay with her parents, saying we'd talk the next day when we were both calmer. I spent the rest of the day fielding calls and messages from concerned friends and family members, explaining that the decision was final and I was doing fine despite the circumstances. The next morning, I was having coffee and reading emails when my doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Amanda's father standing on my doorstep. He asked politely if he could come in to talk, and despite my reservations, I let him into my house. Her father seemed calm and reasonable initially, accepting my offer of coffee and sitting down at my kitchen table like we'd done countless times during family gatherings. He said he wanted to understand my perspective on what had happened and see if there might be a way to work through our differences before throwing away such a long relationship. I appreciated his measured approach, so I explained my reasoning about the prenup and asset protection. He nodded thoughtfully, saying he'd done some research about prenups and could see why a business owner would want legal protections. He seemed genuinely interested in understanding the business rationale behind my decision. However, as our conversation continued, Amanda's father's tone gradually shifted from understanding to manipulative. He started talking about how much Amanda loved me and how devastated she was by the breakup. According to him, she'd cried all night and couldn't understand how our relationship had deteriorated so quickly over a piece of paper. He mentioned how excited their entire family had been about the wedding. He talked about the deposits his family had put down for their hotel rooms and travel arrangements, making it clear that my decision was affecting more people than just Amanda and me. Then he moved into more subtle manipulation, suggesting that requiring a prenup would send the wrong message to the community about our relationship. According to Amanda's father, people would think I didn't trust Amanda or believed she was after my money. He implied that this kind of thinking was insulting to their integrity and family values. As Amanda's father continued talking, I realized he was running a carefully planned guilt campaign designed to make me reconsider my decision. Every argument was calculated to make me feel selfish, untrusting, and wrong for protecting assets I'd legitimately earned. He was trying to reframe my reasonable business decision as an insult to his daughter and family. Rather than argue with him or explain why his manipulation wasn't working, I decided to play along. I started nodding at his points and making non-committal sounds of agreement. When he suggested that maybe the prenup was unnecessary since Amanda and I truly loved each other, I said, maybe you have a point. When he implied that successful relationships required complete financial trust, I replied, I should think about it from that perspective. My performance seemed to convince him that his guilt trip was working. He left my house believing he'd successfully changed my mind about the prenup and the wedding cancellation. As soon as he walked out my door, I felt more certain than ever that I'd made the right decision. This visit revealed exactly why Amanda had reacted so strongly to the prenup request. Her entire family viewed my success as something that should automatically extend to them through marriage. They couldn't understand why I'd want to protect assets I'd earned before the relationship because they already saw those assets as partially theirs. The manipulation tactics Amanda's father used also explained where Amanda had learned to frame reasonable requests as personal insults. Her family's approach to conflict resolution involved emotional manipulation and guilt rather than honest discussion and compromise. If I married into this family, I'd spend years dealing with people who saw my boundaries as attacks on their character. The next day, Amanda texted asking to meet for coffee to discuss our situation. I agreed, curious to see if she'd approach the conversation differently after her father's intervention. We met at a neutral location where we'd had many pleasant dates during happier times. Amanda apologized for her emotional reaction to the prenup, but maintained that she couldn't sign such an agreement. She offered what she thought was a compromise, a smaller wedding with fewer guests, or a longer engagement to give us more time to work through our differences. She genuinely seemed to believe that the size or timing of our wedding was the issue rather than our fundamental incompatibility about money and marriage. I realized during this conversation that Amanda still didn't understand why the prenup was necessary or reasonable. She saw it purely as a lack of trust rather than a legitimate business protection. Her proposed compromises addressed symptoms rather than the underlying problem. I confirmed during this coffee meeting that our wedding was permanently canceled and our relationship was over. Amanda cried and asked me to reconsider, but I explained that our different views about money and marriage made us incompatible as life partners. She left the coffee shop still believing that I was making a mistake, but at least understanding that my decision was final. Over the next few days, Amanda's family launched a coordinated pressure campaign designed to change my mind. Her mother called my parents directly, trying to convince them to talk sense into me, pushing for reconciliation without the prenup. Everyone in Amanda's family had the same basic message. The prenup was unnecessary because Amanda truly loved me and would never try to take my money in a divorce. They couldn't understand that the prenup wasn't about Amanda's intentions. It was about protecting assets I'd legally earned before our relationship began. I stood firm despite the pressure campaign, recognizing it as more evidence that I'd made the right decision. A family that would coordinate manipulation tactics to get around reasonable legal protections wasn't a family I wanted to marry into. A week later, Amanda had moved all her belongings out of my condo and returned her engagement ring. The physical separation felt anticlimactic after months of emotional turmoil, but it also brought a sense of relief and closure. I was free to focus on my business and personal growth without worrying about financial manipulation or family guilt trips. In the 3 months since our breakup, I've had time to reflect on what went wrong and what I learned from the experience. The prenup wasn't really about protecting money. It was about finding a partner who understood and respected the work I'd put into building my business. Amanda's refusal to sign the agreement revealed that she saw my success as something she was already entitled to rather than something I'd earned through years of effort. I've also learned to recognize manipulation tactics disguised as emotional appeals. If I'd given in to Amanda's family guilt trips about the prenup, I would have spent years dealing with people who saw my financial boundaries as personal attacks. Most importantly, I've realized the importance of financial compatibility in marriage. Amanda and I were compatible in many ways. We enjoyed each other's company, shared similar life goals, and had good physical chemistry. However, our fundamental differences about money and individual achievement made us incompatible as life partners. Looking back, I realized the prenup wasn't the problem. It was the solution. It revealed fundamental incompatibilities that would have caused much bigger problems later in our marriage. The experience taught me that love isn't enough to overcome fundamental differences about money and personal boundaries. You can genuinely care about someone while recognizing they're wrong for you as a life partner. Sometimes, The most loving thing you can do is end a relationship before it becomes a marriage that hurts both people. Today, I'm focused on continuing to build my business and finding someone who shares my values about individual achievement and financial responsibility. I'm not opposed to marriage, but I'm committed to finding a partner who understands that reasonable legal protections aren't personal attacks on their character. The prenup controversy taught me that the right person will understand and support your need for asset protection because they want what's best for both of you. Someone who truly loves you won't try to guilt you out of reasonable legal precautions or mobilize their family to pressure you into ignoring your financial boundaries. Most importantly, I learned that standing firm on your principles, even when it costs you a relationship and wedding deposits, is sometimes the most valuable investment you can make in your future happiness and financial security.